Hello again. Welcome. We'll begin this video with a discussion of the universal Christ. Very important concept. The concept of time and the measurement of its passing by humankind have been present on this planet for millennia. For as long as this has been so, and perhaps even before then, there have come among us from time to time those persons whose lives have been so exemplary that they have blessed and changed the lives of those around them to such a degree that their ideas and ideals continued in a positive way to affect the lives of others long after they had left this mortal shell behind and gone on to higher realms. The names of many such persons have long been lost in the mist of time as the ages have rolled by. More recently, the names of some have been remembered, repeated by word of mouth, then later written down century after century to the present day. A bit later, I will mention just a few of them. Depending upon the culture and traditions under which one has lived, the names and times of those special persons may differ. I suspect, however, that many of the stories are similar to one degree or another. I have lived under Western tradition with rather strong Judeo-Christian influence in the upbringing process. The focus in that area, therefore, should not be surprising. A life under other traditions would likely have brought forth the names of different personalities as examples of the above, but the concept would be the same, and some of the stories perhaps even somewhat similar as stated. Each human person is born with the essence, so to speak, or the seed of the universal Christ within themselves. To what degree that seed even begins to germinate within a person, much less completes that process and begins to grow toward maturity, depends upon the decisions made by that person within their lifetime, and by decisions made by that personality in previous incarnations, the sum total of which constitutes the previous preparation, the current spiritual state, and the potential for spiritual growth of the individual person being considered. A very small number of those persons, because of many right decisions over many lifetimes, are born with the potential in a particular lifetime to experience the germination and growth of the universal Christ Spirit within themselves as they continue to strive to move onward and upward in their journey through this life. There are, at extremely rare times, a very, very few who experience the growth of the universal Christ Spirit within themselves to such a degree that they actually then experience a oneness with the manifestation of the then fully mature universal Christ Spirit within themselves. They experience Christhood, or they become Christed. This is an extremely difficult path for someone to follow in their life, and especially to do so to the degree necessary to experience such a manifestation of Christhood. As you might imagine, there have been exceedingly few who have had such a blessing. I do not pretend to know all their names. It can be said, however, that among those have been the masters Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, and Jesus, to just name some of those select few. There are, without question, many people today who feel that it is impossible to attain such a high spiritual state in our modern times. Let me say again, however, that if you have access to a Judeo-Christian Bible, you'll be able to see otherwise. The universal Christ Spirit, who had created a state of oneness with the Master Jesus, taught us that greater things than those which had been done would be done. This is stated in the Judeo-Christian Bible in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 12, and its meaning is that which the Master Jesus had attained, and even greater things, others could and would attain also. Because of its great importance, I will here also say, once again, that contrary to the understanding of many followers of Christianity, this does not exclude Christhood. Most people who have read that biblical verse do not realize that such things are still possible today. Be aware that Christhood is or should be the ultimate goal of every aspirant who is a true seeker. It must be stated, however, that prior to the early 1980s, only one person among those who received this very special blessing of Christhood was actually born into a state of oneness with the fully mature universal Christ Spirit. The Master Jesus was that person. The first person who became one with the mature universal Christ Spirit at the moment of birth. All of the others who reach Christhood attained that state of oneness at some later point in their lives when they became worthy and ready to receive that blessing. Now, once again, the consciousness and understanding of humankind has been raised sufficiently. The new age is at hand, and the need is such that the earth is ready for another of God's messengers to come and once again unveil and reveal to us yet another, even higher level of truth that will help to bring us to yet another higher level of understanding of God's universe. I've touched on this subject in other videos, but I will restate these extremely important points of information once again at this time. This person's message will not be just for the Jews, or for the Arabs, or for the North, or the South Americans, or for the Africans, or the Europeans, or the Asians. It will be for all of them, and for all of the people of the world, the entire planet. For the purpose of bringing God's message for these times to all the world, there is on this earth now, today, one who has, like the Master Jesus, been in a state of complete oneness with the universal Christ Spirit since the moment of birth. That person's name or place of residence or when the person's work will begin in earnest, I do not know. Nor does any other living person, with the possible exception of the parents of this person, who may know that their child is the Christ, but even their having that knowledge at this time is not a certainty. This person is one with the universal Christ Spirit, just as the beloved Master Jesus was in his time. Furthermore, just as the beloved Master Jesus was the master of and God's messenger for the Piscean or Piscean age, this person who is alive, growing, maturing, and preparing on our planet today is the master and God's messenger to the entire world for the Aquarian age. For the first time in history, it has been set up such that with the technology that we have today, that people all over the world can be reached by one person. When this person's ministry or work begins in earnest, this master will lay the spiritual foundation for future humankind, a new covenant, so to speak. When that work is done, this messenger of God will then leave us, and those who are so chosen will remain here for a time to build upon that spiritual foundation that has been laid down. This will allow humankind in the years following to continue on the path away from the materialism of today and back to a far greater sense of love and brotherhood and sisterhood, even more importantly, to stay on the path that leads back to God, the true Father of us all. As it was in the time of the Master Jesus the Christ, those who will not recognize God's messenger as the universal Christ, those who will persecute and despise this person most, will sadly be among those who consider themselves the most devoutly religious of our day. The reason for this is because of the fact that there are so many persons in the world today who expect the return of the man Jesus rather than the return of the universal Christ Spirit. This universal Christ Spirit, who once again, as it happened with the Master Jesus, has come here to this planet with the birth of a human child, and in a state of oneness with the spirit of this child, just as it was done before, and just as it will be done again, at least one additional time far in the future. Sadly, even if the man Jesus were to return today to this earth, neither would those same people recognize him. especially if he didn't espouse their particular doctrine. And so would they therefore persecute and despise him again today, as others like them did approximately 2,000 years ago. Perhaps these doubters would need to see a bright halo around the top of his head to show them a sign of sorts before they would believe. But such a halo isn't visible to normal physical eyesight. If it were, they certainly would not have crucified the Master Jesus when they did back then, because there would have been no doubt at all to those who saw him that he was a very special man. Such a halo, however, is visible only to, quote, those who have eyes to see, end quote. And so therefore will a great many of the most devout and religious, so-called, of the day fail to recognize the presence of the beloved universal Christ Spirit yet again. The beloved Master Jesus has completed his work upon this planet, first as the master of the Piscean or Piscean age, the man whose spirit was one with the universal Christ Spirit and who was the Christ. He then has acted in a spiritual capacity for approximately the last 2,000 years as our planetary Logos. The man Jesus, who was one with the universal Christ Spirit and who therefore was the Christ, as I've stated, has no need to return to this earth in physical form. When it was spoken that he would return, the he of whom it was spoken was the universal Christ Spirit, who, in a state of oneness with the spirit of the man Jesus, occupied his body at that time. It was the return of the universal Christ Spirit that was being spoken of then, not the return of the man Jesus, even though Jesus was one with the universal Christ Spirit at that time, and again, as stated before, was therefore the Christ. When the Master of the Aquarian Age has completed all the necessary work here in the physical body, that Master will then become our planetary Logos, and the beloved Master Jesus will go on to become the Holy Solar Logos, the spiritual force behind our physical sun in this solar system. The universal Christ Spirit is the spiritual force behind the great central sun of God's universe. This is the way of these things. Let's now consider a different subject, a subject that one might ask about it. Is it blasphemy or truth? For some who watch what's been stated here and in other videos, these words will seem to have no basis in truth and will be considered instead as blasphemy. For a growing number of people around the world, however, what's being said here makes perfect sense, and some may even find as they watch that these words, which are truth for them, strike a truly resonant chord within themselves, within their being. It's especially for these latter persons that these videos have been created. It's for them and also for others who may be somewhere in between in their thinking and in their searching for answers that will somehow make sense to them, that these videos have been created and these words have been given to you. It's for the entire planet, however, that the Master of and God's messenger for the Aquarian Age, and I'm speaking of the universal Christ, has come. And it's for the entire planet that this messenger of God will work to lay the spiritual foundation for the future of our world and for all of us who reside upon it. This spiritual foundation will then become the next covenant, or the basis upon which will be built the future society for all of humankind on the planet Earth for more than 1,000 years to come. And the Master of this age, the universal Christ, will once again be the cornerstone. This concludes this video in the series. I thank you for watching. I invite you to watch the next video and subsequent videos in this series. Again, my thanks.